Certainly there was an advance of purchasing. People went out and bought things that they might not have done over, such a short period of time. But I think that this will continue to actually be a bit of a challenge, because we're going to find that there are problems with the manufacturing facilities, production facilities, retailers. All of these people are going to be having trouble finding the people they need in order to supply them the goods.
Now, unfortunately, we did see some people actually throwing out food. They bought it in a panic and then it's spoiled.
Yeah.
So do you think there'll be any sort of longer-term shift in the types of products that people buy at supermarkets?
Yes, I think that what we saw at first is people were buying things like beef and poultry and other items. But now we have a lot of people that have been off of work for a couple of weeks, and we're going to be getting into our third and fourth weeks. And so what people are going to do is they're going to have to start thinking about the long term. And that's going to shift people from buying sort of higher cost items to more value shopping over time.
So then, will consumers, do you think, shift back to basics and essentials, or do you see them perhaps eventually getting back to discretionary items as well?
Well, I don't see anybody moving back to discretionary items until they have a sense of how long this crisis is going to last.
Now, obviously, we know that there are many countries around the world who export agricultural products. Could this outbreak lead to more trade disruptions due to slowing of transport, especially since there were already existing trade frictions even before this broke out?
Yes, I think that we're going to see a lot more of that globally. You see other countries right now are stopping travel to other countries, China, Japan, South Korea, and other places. And this could begin to have a problem coming the other way with products in those countries coming to the United States. And so I think we should expect more and more trade disruptions to occur.
Now, let's look at who this is affecting the most. I mean, as restaurants and food producers are forced to shut down or reduce production, does that mean that the ones who survive are going to be these huge industrial food producers, or these corporate restaurant chains, are really having the little mom-and-pop chains getting pushed out?
Well, I certainly think that the small restaurants and grocery chains are going to be squeezed. I think there's no question about that. They just don't have the deep pockets in order to be able to sustain weeks or even months without any business. So I think it will have a longer-term impact. But what we're also seeing is that consumers are shifting to larger brands because of trust in those brands. And so some of the smaller, more niche products are just sitting on the shelves while people look to the staple products that they've known for a long time.
And do you see that being the same case when it comes to small-scale producers around the world and the sort of diversity in the global food supply chains?
Yeah, I think that more and more people are going to focus on the things that they know, and that's going to have an impact on the global supply chain. Now, there are a lot of products that are ingredients that are coming from other countries, and those are still going to be needed. But if there's disruption in trade, then some of the manufacturers in the United States are going to be turning to local suppliers, and that may have longer-term impacts as it moves on.
It's hard to find a bright spot in some of these situations, but one of the few types of companies that do seem to be doing well amid this outbreak are some of these food delivery companies. Does this pandemic mark a shift in where and how consumers will buy and consume food from outside the home?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent observation. I think that for many people, you had sort of early adopters who felt comfortable purchasing from these websites before, buying things online. But for your average consumer, that just wasn't something they were used to doing. But because of the current situation, a lot more Americans are trying their hand at buying online, having grocery stores deliver their products, having some of these different companies deliver food to their door. And so once they get used to that, it's very likely that they'll continue to make use of those services after the crisis ends.
And what would you say are the biggest bright spots and challenges that you're keeping an eye on in the coming months?
Well, I think that one thing that we're seeing is consumers are changing from sort of perception of risk, looking for gluten-free and no preservatives and other things. And today they're a little bit more aware of the difference between risk and perception of risk. And so, that may be something that actually has a longer-term benefit, because when you look at consumer attitudes over the last few years, in many ways consumers have never been more scared about the food they eat, and yet our food has never been safer. And so hopefully this will remind consumers that we do have a safe food supply and that they need to understand and appreciate where that food comes from.
And do you see that perhaps some of these genetically modified products and things, do you think perhaps as people look for more resilient food supplies that could become a more popular option?
I think that what will happen is that people will worry less about things like that they'll begin to understand that it's important that we have access to a safe, nutritious, and sufficient food supply that's sustainably produced, and that'll make people a little bit more open to innovation in the food supply.